Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dr. Doctor, the show where no topic is too hot or too cold. Whether it's politics, religion, relationships, entertainment, or everyday life, you will be hearing from the experts. This show is not for the faint of heart or the faint of mind. But if you want to be inspired, you have come to the right place. And now, prepare to be enlightened as we introduce the host of Dr. Doctor, Dr. Peter Tassi, and his close advisor, Dr. Fooch.
Welcome to Dr. Doctor, Part 2 of the History of Time. Thank you for joining us again for another boring session of the history of time, but informative and educational. In the history of time, you saw that we brought you in Part 1 from the beginning of the universe, roughly 13.5 billion years ago, all the way up to 3000 BC, which is about 5,000 years ago. We will refer to time now in terms of BC and AD. So BC, as you know, before Christ, and we left off at 3000 BC, the beginning of civilization, where people became agricultural, and our ancestors settled in one place. We started getting bigger and bigger cities, if you want to call them, because people didn't have to be nomadic. They didn't have to travel from place to place, hunting food and so on and so forth. So let's continue right away. Let's get right into it. 3000 BC to 1500 BC. Massive monuments, buildings, and temples made of cement replace the huts. The seeds of modern-day religions are sown, with Hinduism in Pakistan and later Judaism in the Middle East. The Sumerian number system in use is based on 12 rather than 10, causing our days to be divided into two 12-hour blocks and our hour to be 60 minutes and a minute 60 seconds. The Egyptians devised a new use for the wheel, the chariot. An unnamed printer of ancient Crete in Minoan age develops a primitive printing technique in 1700 BC. It is the first printing press, but proves impractical because of the complexity of the language and primitive technological development. 1500 to 1000 BC, the Bronze Age collapses and the Iron Age begins, with the use of iron and eventual development of steel for metal tools. Places on Earth where there are fewer domesticated animals and less fertile land remain tied to more ancient ways of living. In other areas, with the development and use of horses and iron weapons, military empires form. The first major civilization emerges in Central and North America. People develop a simple way to estimate the passage of time by tracking the length and position of a shadow cast by a vertical stick. The camel is used for transport in many parts of the world. 6 camels can carry 2 tons of cargo 60 miles a day. They carry salt from the Sahara to Rome, rice from Asia to India, and the secrets of paper making to Europe from China. The camel plays a critical role in the development of cultures. 1000 to 500 BC, the original alphabet is developed by a Semitic people living in or near Egypt. It is based on ideas developed by the Egyptians using symbols specific to their culture. It is quickly adopted by their neighborhood and by their neighbors and their relatives to the east and north, the Canaanites, the Hebrews, and the Phoenicians. By at least the 8th century BC, the Greeks borrowed the Phoenician alphabet and adapted it to their own language, creating in the process the first true alphabet in which vowels are accorded equal status with consonants. The separation of philosophy and science from theology began in Greece during the 6th century BC. Thales, an astronomer and mathematician, was considered by Aristotle to be the first philosopher of the Greek tradition. While Pythagoras coined the word, the first known elaboration on the topic was conducted by no other than Plato himself. 500 BC to 100 BC, the Persian Empire of 2.1 million square miles dates to the 500s. Buddhism begins within Asia at this time, while Confucianism begins in the 400s. The first democracy, Athenian democracy, is developed around the 6th century BC in Greek city-state known as a polis of Athens. It is often described as the world's first known democracy. Cast iron is made into steel in China, while the crossbow is developed in China and Egypt in 400 BC. Socrates, a Greek philosopher in the 400s, is considered the father of Western philosophy. He is followed by Plato and Aristotle, who deeply influenced the world of intellectual thought. They also set up the first institute of learning in the Western world. Alexander the Great Empire in Egypt is 2 million square miles, introducing Greek philosophy, culture, and art in the Mediterranean world in the 300s. The blast furnace and horse collar are developed in China in the 200s. The compass is developed by the Chinese to aid in fortune telling in the 200s, but humans use it to aid in their desire to explore, discovering and recording new lands and water masses around the world. The compass would become more practical in the 11th century AD. Paper is developed also in China, eventually moving to Korea and Japan in 120 AD. Euclid, who was between 325 and 265 BC, of Alexandria, writes the Elements of Geometry, in which he presents geometry in an ideal axiomatic form. It comes to be known as the Euclidean geometry. 100 BC to 0. The simple steam turbine, tending machines, and automatic doors are developed in the Greek world. That's hard to believe, but it was that long ago when it was first developed. Horse stirrups are invented in China in 100. The Han Chinese Empire covers 2.3 million square miles in the 50s BC. Roman engineer Vitruvius invents the water wheel in the 50s BC. This converts the flow of running water into mechanical energy, which is used to crush grain, power lathes, and drive sawmills. The first calendar, a solar calendar, is developed by the Egyptians. Then Julius Caesar creates the Julian calendar with 12 months in the 40s BC. Because this calendar was off by 11 minutes, Pope Gregory XIII would perfect it in 1582 AD, calling it the Gregorian calendar. Romans invented ancient concrete and perfected it to the point that their colosseums and cathedrals have withstood the test of time. We have since improved the formula for making concrete. 0 to 200 AD. Jesus begins his ministry in 28 AD, and the seeds of Christianity are sown. The Roman Empire is expanded to 1.9 million square miles in 119 AD. China is dominated by the Han Dynasty. As empires grow, there is massive trade, more and more travel routes, communication, and growth of the major world religions. Another primitive printing press is developed by the Chinese during this time. They would smear ink on Buddhist texts on marble pillars and then transfer the text to the new Chinese invention of paper. The aeolipile is a simple steam turbine. It is invented. Steam is also used for many other inventions, such as primitive vending machines and automatic door openers. The wheelbarrow, seismometers, and pendulums are also invented. 200 to 400 AD. The Roman Empire makes greater and greater use of turbines. China drills oil wells. China also improves its printing capabilities in the form of wood block printing. China becomes the world's first print culture. We also see in China the invention of the fishing reel and stirrups. Roman Emperor Constantine converts Christianity in 312 AD. His conversion to Christianity caused Christianity to become the dominant religion of the Western Empire and Europe, and the actual legal religion of the time. The crank is invented, converting circular motion into reciprocating motion. As well, the connecting rod is developed, converting reciprocating motion into rotating motion. The paddle wheel boat is also invented in the Roman Empire. At this time in history, there are approximately 60 million people on the planet. 400 to 500 AD. The most commonly used system of numerals is the Hindu-Arabic system. 2 Indian mathematicians are credited with developing it. They developed the place value notation. A century later, they introduced the symbol of zero. They were introduced to Europe through the writings of the Middle Eastern mathematicians in roughly the 12th century. This system would later allow for major advances in science and mathematics. This period is marked by the collapse of the Roman Empire and the uniting of Europe through Christianity. It also marked migration of peoples, population distribution, and deurbanization. We see the horse collar and full harness invented in China. Artwork is being made in the form of paintings on a separate surface and murals on walls or permanent surfaces. We see also the creation of the arch bridge. 500 AD to 800 AD. This marks the beginning of the Middle Ages, running until the 1400s. Some refer to it as the Dark Ages because there was a lull in learning and literacy. However, it was still a time period that marked many inventions, including the spinning wheel in India and the windmill in Persia. Islam begins with Muhammad in 570 in Mecca and Medina. It unifies a vast expanse of territory, and Arab trade drives innovation for the next 1,000 years. The first mechanical clock is invented by Yi Cheng in China. Before this, sundials had been used for 6,000 years. Later came the development of water clocks by the Egyptians and Chinese. In China, we see more inventions: silkscreen printing, suspension bridges using chains, toilet paper, and drill bits. In other parts of the world, we see the invention of a postal office, chess, a blast furnace, and a political constitution in Japan. 800 to 1,000. Chemists in China combine carbon and sulfur and invent gunpowder. This recipe quickly moves to the Islamic world and is used to make cannons that are used in warfare. The oldest existing, continually operating educational institution in the world is the University of Cairn, founded in 859 AD in Fez, Morocco. The University of Bologna, Italy, was founded in 1088, and is the oldest in Europe. Numerical zero, invented some 400 years earlier, appears in China and in Islamic cultures and countries. Although algebra is seen in previous centuries, Muhammad ibn al-Khwarizmi in the 9th century becomes known as the father of algebra. By 868, China was printing books. They would carve out a text on wooden blocks and with ink transfer the message to paper. There are roughly 300 million people on the planet at this time. 1000 to 1300. In 1041, Pi Cheng devises a movable type made of baked clay and glue amalgam for the purpose of printing. Many subsequent inventors improved this until Gutenberg made printing more efficient. China creates 6,000 miles of roads, the Silk Route, for trade and communication. An ambulance is used in the Crusades, and Su Song in China further develops the idea of endless power transmitting chain drive. The mariner's compass, wet compass in China as it's called, is developed. The dry compass is developed in medieval Europe. Other inventions include the camshaft, explosive bombs, hand cannons, the rocket, torpedo, landmines, and eyeglasses. Leonardo Fibonacci introduces the modern Hindu-Arabic decimal numeral system to Europe. Before this, Roman numerals were used. Roger Bacon, in 1214 to 1284, is credited as the first scholar to promote inductive reasoning as part of the scientific method. This scientific method relies on empirical data based on observation or experimentation. 1300 to 1400. Caravel ships 600 to 100 feet long are invented by the Portuguese. Because of their unique design and sails, these ships allow for lengthy travels across great waters and exploration of the world. The first mechanical clocks employing the verge escapement mechanism with a balance wheel timekeeper are invented in Europe at the start of the 14th century and become the standard timekeeping device until the pendulum clock was invented in 1656. We also see scales for whaling, the first sawmill, glassmaking, and the first mention of handguns. 1400 to 1500, Johannes Gutenberg, 1439, discovers the printing press in Germany. Books were previously handwritten. Accumulated knowledge can be circulated now to the masses. Modern civilization is based on this invention, while it played a critical and crucial role in the Industrial Revolution. The America's great civilization consists of the Aztecs, Maya, and Incas. European nations come to the Americas to increase their wealth and exercise influence over world affairs. The Spanish are the first to settle in what is now known as the United States. 95% of the native population dies because of the guns and diseases brought by European explorers and settlers. Europe becomes hooked on gold, silver, and sugar, introducing slavery to facilitate in their manufacturing of these items. Peoples from Europe, but especially Africa, are enslaved. The Renaissance period begins and runs until the 1600s. 1500 to 1600, Francis Bacon, an English philosopher and statesman, serves as Attorney General and Lord Chancellor of England. His works are credited with developing the scientific method and remain influential throughout the scientific revolution. When Zacharias Johanson invents the microscope around 1590, we are able to see a whole new world of living things in our water and food. Hans Lippershey invents the telescope. Newspapers are invented in Korea. The first flush toilets appear in England. Also, the pocket watch, knitting machine, Galileo's water thermometer, and Da Vinci's horizontal water wheel are invented. 1600 to 1700. William Gilbert studied magnetism and electricity, followed by Thomas Brown, who made further studies. However, there is evidence that people experimented with electricity 2,000 years ago. using a clay pot, copper plates, tin alloy, and iron rods. Arguably the first computer, the abacus, or slide ruler, is invented by William Oughtred in 1622. Otto van Guericke established the physics of vacuums and demonstrated electrostatic repulsion. Christian Huygens, considered one of the greatest scientists of all time, invented the pendulum clock, formulated the wave theory of light, as well as centrifugal force and the true shape of rings of Saturn. Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz independently invented calculus in the mid-17th century. Calculus changes the world, especially in the realms of science and engineering. Other inventions: the slide rule, mechanical calculator, barometer, and vacuum pump. 1700 to 1750, Thomas Newcomb invents the steam engine in 1712, a pump generated by steam to pump water out of deep mines so that coal can be retrieved. This begins the Industrial Revolution. Alchemy, the working with elements to transform matter. Most popular in this new field is the attempt of scientists to turn lead into gold. They also attempt to make elixirs of all types for different purposes, such as universal healing agents. Peter van Musschenbroek harnesses electricity with the Leyden jar in 1745. Other inventions in this time period: the piano, thermometer, artificial refrigerator machine, improved steam engine by James Watt, mechanical air compressor, steamboat, hot air balloon, sewing machine, hydraulic press, lithography, plywood, air compressors, and a paper machine. The Enlightenment period begins and runs until the French Revolution in 1789. 1750 to 1800, Benjamin Franklin discovers electricity. He discovered that electricity had positive and negative elements and that electricity flowed between these two elements. James Watt perfects the steam engine. It's now possible to manufacture with the steam engine. People swarm to industrialized cities to get work in factories where they mass produce items for sale. Railway transports all necessities to the cities. Nicholas Joseph Cugnot invents the first steam-powered passenger vehicle. Edward Jenner discovers the first vaccination for smallpox. Prior to this, 50 million people had died from smallpox. The modern period begins in 1789 and runs to the present. Roughly 1 billion people are on the planet. 1800 to 1825, the battery or portable energy packet is invented by Alessandro Volta. It is known as the voltaic pile and is made up of zinc, copper plates, and vinegar with leather between the plates. Humphrey Davy invented the first electric light. Warren de la Rue continued researching this and developing it. The first steam-powered train is invented by George Stephenson. The engine was designed by James Watt and John Bleckenshap. Massive loads of everything and anything can now be carried long distances more quickly than ever before. The first mechanical computer is invented by Charles Babbage to do computation. It has many, many moving parts. 1825 to 1850, Charles Babbage invents the first computer to resemble the ones we have today. He invents the difference or analytical engine that integrated memory. The electric telegraph is invented by Samuel Morse. Messages are carried along cables and there is less need for long-distance messengers. The refrigerator is developed by Jacob Perkins. Mirrors by Justin von Liebig. Davenport, Henry, and Faraday create early motion devices using electromagnetic fields. Eventually, the electric motor, where electricity produces mechanical motion, would transform society. Crawford Long invents anesthesia. 1850 to 1875, Henry Bessemer invents steel in 1850. He experimented with iron to lower the carbon content. Steel became one of the most commonly used building materials because it's cheaper and more flexible than iron and and other materials as well, and stronger than wrought iron. Antonio Meucci invents the telephone in 1850. It is refined by Charles Bourseul in 1854, and Alexander Graham Bell gets the patent in 1876. Joseph William Swan created a light bulb that was more functional. Edison invents the first commercially practical incandescent light. Aspirin, a medication to relieve headaches and body pain, is invented. Copper cables are laid in the Atlantic Ocean, creating a transatlantic telegraph cable connecting Europe and America in 1858. Until William Drake drilled for oil in 1859, we only used oil that came to the surface of the earth. Drilling changed human history. It meant changes to transportation and the creation of thousands of products, including road tar, paint, plastics, and clothing. Etienne Lenoir discovers the combustion engine, and it is used in trains. Meanwhile, the Germans developed the automobile. Nicholas Otto improves the combustion engine. 1875 to 1900, psychology is born. The place, the University of Leipzig. The birth parent, William Wundt. The deed, establishing the first university laboratory for the study of psychology. This event is viewed by many as the unofficial beginning of scientific exploration that differ from accepted empirical evidence. Alexander Graham Bell patents the telephone. Edison improves the light bulb, developing a bulb that lasts more than 1,000 hours and creates the first electrical grid fueled by coal. Louis Pasteur develops a vaccine for rabies. Carl Benz creates the first car. Other inventions of the 1800s. The 1800s marks so many inventions, just an explosion of inventions. Here are some others. Morphine, steam locomotion, general anesthetics, internal combustion engine, canning processes, printing presses, more sophisticated ones, Stirling engine, first photographic process, the lighter, bolt action rifle, match, air compressor, electric motor, solar cell, repeating rifle, electric generator, phonograph, arc welder, steam turbine, diesel engine, communication by radio waves, x-rays, plastic, and the discovery of radio waves. 1900 to 1925, inventions include the television, military tank, electronic microscope, FM radio, computer, nuclear fission, ballistic missile, and the electric cash register. Marconi transmit a wireless signal across the ocean by turning mechanical energy into electrical energy with a generator. The Wright brothers test the Flyer, flying 120 feet in 12 seconds. Carrier introduces the air conditioner. Henry Ford introduces the Model T Ford and the invention of the assembly line, offering the middle class affordable automotives, making the car affordable for the middle class people. This leads to the development and improvement of roads and highways. 1925 to 1950, the first electronic television is invented by 20-year-old Philo Taylor Farnsworth. He had lived in a house without electricity until the age of 14. Prior to this, the first mechanical televisions were built by Paul Nipkow, refined by John Baird and Francis Jenkins. Alexander Fleming discovers penicillin. Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann split atoms to release energy. Konrad Zuse invents the first modern functional computer, the Z1. It is the first electromechanical binary programmable computer. Many more sophisticated computers would be invented from then to today. John Borden, Walter Britton, and William Shockley discovered the semiconductor. This is the foundation of electronic devices and of modern digital age. On December 28, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized the formation of the Manhattan Project to bring together various scientists and military officials working on nuclear research. Much of the work was performed in Los Alamos, New Mexico, under the direction of theoretical physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. On July 16, 1945, in a remote desert location near Alamogordo, New Mexico, the first atomic bomb was successfully detonated. This was called the Trinity test. It created an enormous mushroom cloud some 40,000 feet high and ushered in the atomic age. 1950 to 1975, while in her 80s, Margaret Sanger underwrite the research necessary to create the first human birth control pill. 1954, the kidney is the first human organ to be transplanted successfully. By the late 60s, liver, heart, and pancreas transplants were successfully performed, while lung and intestinal organ transplant procedures begin in the 80s. The Internet is created by the U.S. Department of Defense in the 1960s. Genetic engineering, the direct transfer of DNA from one organism to another, was first accomplished by Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen in 1964. Personal computers are developed in the 1970s. Fred Sanger develops genetic sequencing in the 70s, allowing us to read information stored in genes. General Motors installs its first robot in the factory in 1961. It does the work a human had been doing. Approximately 4 billion people are on the planet. 1975 to present. In 1983, Bob Kahn and Vint Cerf create the ARPANET, the first networks that become the basis of the Internet. Tim Berners-Lee invents the World Wide Web in 1990. The entire world is connected on many levels, and the world undergoes dramatic change. Technology explodes and inventions are numerous, including the Android, GPS, social networking platforms, self-driving cars, electric cars, rechargeable batteries, flash memory, Bluetooth, and much, much more. Approximately 7.7 billion people live on the planet. Well, that ends our history of time from the beginning of the universe till present. And we can see there that it takes the minds of many, we only mentioned a few, but really it's the minds and ingenuity of tens of millions of people over tens of thousands of years that brings us to today. And of course, we highlight just the ones that come up with the actual invention or the patent, but there are thousands. For every new idea, there are thousands of people contributing a little bit here and there to make that happen. And I hope you enjoyed that History of Time presentation. Now, if you'd like to win $50, you can do just that by submitting what you will believe. By submitting what you believe will be the next few great inventions to propel human evolution even farther. Will it be element 115 that changes energy as we know it? Will it be the ability to affect weather, the elements in our air, and climate change? Perhaps it'll be some great innovation that will provide the earth with an infinite source of food. How about inventions that provide infinite sources of fresh water, because presently only 1% of the water on Earth is fresh water? There is projected to be a 600% increase in travel over the next 30 years. Will we invent new methods of travel? Cities are poised to explode in size. Can you see any new great invention that will assist or be part of this development? Do your best to come up with what you think would be new and revolutionary, changing the world and propelling us into the future. Explain how you see it being made and how it would work. Rather than a specific invention or discovery, you may want to focus on what you think will be the next significant change in the human body or mind that will lead humans to evolve more quickly or better adapt to an ever-changing world. Just like we saw the changes in the human body over time when we look back millions of years ago, from 4 or 5 million years ago up to up to 30,000, 50,000 years ago, we saw that the human body changed in many ways. Submit your ideas to our email, drdoctorpodcast@yahoo.com. That's drdrpodcast@yahoo.com. And if you're selected, we will send you a $50 gift for coming up with the most innovative or most creative invention or idea that will assist in human evolution. Thank you for joining Dr. Doctor today, and we wish you a great day.